Kant's philosophy is all about doing the right things for the right reasons and not for selfish interests. He says, if a despondent or dejected man wishes for death, yet perseveres his life without loving it, not from inclination or fear, but from duty, then his maxim has moral content. He's showing here in this extreme example of a person who does not feel that their life has any worth, but they continue living it out of duty, then they have extreme moral worth because they are fulfilling their life's destiny and fulfilling the need to fulfill their duty. He also says, act only accordingly to the maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. By saying that, Kant is saying that base your actions off of everything that you wish other people would do for you. He said he doesn't think people should act accordingly to self-interest or self-love, but for the universe and for everybody else. He also says, act in a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in a person another, always in the same as an end, and never put simply as a means. By saying this, he's saying to not ever use somebody else as a means to your own plan and to your own deception, but to treat other people as if they're their own beings and if they're their own people. Don't ever use them as a means to an end. Kant thinks that people have a moral duty to do the right things for the right reasons, and by simply doing an action that's good does not make them morally worthy. If they do an action that is good, but for the wrong reasons, and especially for self-interest, then they are definitely not good. He also thinks that morality is 100% based on freedom, and by freedom he does not mean unrestricted by rules, but unrestricted by yourself and by internal and external means. Somebody who is addicted to drugs, for example, would not have freedom because they are being controlled by the urge to do that. Somebody who's extremely emotional would not have freedom and would not have morality in their choices because they are not making their choices with a clear, free mind. They are making their choices based on their emotions, and they're not thinking reasonably, but they're thinking more emotionally. Kant believes in all that people need to do the right things for the right reasons based on their own free will, and with that, that is the only way that they can truly do a morally correct action.
This is our graph, and we have Hester as the pink, and then she starts off at a -10 because, as shown on page 174, her act of adultery is described as a sin of passion, not of principle, and not even purpose. And what this is showing is that rather than focusing on trying to make her marriage with her husband better, she's just fulfilling her own self-lust and committing adultery with Dimmesdale. And that is really significant because she's showing that she's governed by emotion over reason here. By chapter 3, her morality rises to a -8 because while she's not confessing Dimmesdale's name for what she claims is the betterment of her child, and she says, and my child must seek a heavenly father, she shall never know an earthly one, page 63. She says this claiming that she wants her daughter to be more focused on building connections with God and with the divine world rather than making her connections with her father on the earthly one. But in reality, she's still being silent for her love for Dimmesdale, and she's still governed by emotions and rather than reason. And this is clear when Dimmesdale is speaking to her, and he says, "Be not silent for any mistaken pity and tenderness for him," page 62. And what that is showing is that she still has emotions for him, she still has pity and tenderness, and that's what's causing her not to speak his name.
In this quote from chapter 4, Hawthorne says, "She forbore to pray for her enemies, lest in spite of her forgiving aspirations, the words of the blessing should twist themselves into a curse." Hester has such a large jump with this quote because she doesn't allow her emotions to cloud her reason and is able to put aside all of the bad things that her enemies have done to her and finally allow herself to pray for their well-being.
Hester increases from a 5 to a 7 when she states, "This badge hath taught me, it daily teaches me lessons whereof my child may be the wiser and the better." Here it shows that Hester has gained a new perspective of the Scarlet Letter, and instead of using her passion and getting mad at herself and society, the fact that they're judging her, she sees it reasonably in that it can teach her daughter, Pearl, something that she wouldn't be able to learn on an everyday basis in society. Her moral worth increases because she makes this decision based off of reason, but it does not go all the way up to 10 because she is still doing it for someone else, her daughter, Pearl, instead of just herself, which is Kant's point of view, to do everything for yourself and not based on other people.
Hester then drops from a 7 to a 4, and we see this when she's leaving the governor's house, and the governor's sister asks her to join her in the woods that night to meet with the black man, and she says, "I would have willingly gone with thee into the forest and signed my name into the black man's book too." And what she's talking about is she would have done it if it weren't for the fact that she got Pearl back. And what this is showing is that, yes, she's doing the right deed by not doing it, but she's not doing it for the right reason, because she's not doing it because she knows that it's wrong. She's only doing it because she's trying to set a good example for Pearl, and because she's happy that she got Pearl back. So yes, her morality is still high at a level of 4, but it's not any higher because she's not doing it for the right reasons. Hester then drops from a 4 to a -5, as we see that she saw or seemed to see there lay great responsibility upon her in reference to the clergyman, which she owed to no other nor the whole world, page 139. What this is showing is that now her emotional attachment to Dimmesdale is causing her to feel a responsibility to protect him from Chillingworth. What that's doing is it's not helping him or the community, because it's causing Dimmesdale more suffering, and it's causing the community to not be able to learn from Dimmesdale's mistake. This is showing that she's not thinking reasonably, and she's thinking more with emotions. But at the same time, she's not a -10, because in the second quote, which says, "Much of the marble coldness of Hester's impression was to be attributed to the circumstance that her life had turned in a great measure from great passion and feeling to thought." This quote's showing that while she's protecting him out of emotion, she's still actually thinking somewhat reasonably, and her emotional attachment with him has diminished slightly and been replaced with a reasonable thought. And because of that, her moral compass is raised to a -5 instead of a -10.
In this quote in chapter 15, Hawthorne says, "What shall I say?" thought Hester to herself. "No, if this is the price of the child's sympathy, I cannot pay it." Hester has a large jump in this quote because she talks about how she doesn't want to pain her daughter with the reality of what the A means to Hester. She's doing this for the right reasons, because she's not trying to hide herself and her past from Pearl, but just trying to shield her from the harsh reality of the world around her.
Hester then drops from a 4 to a 0 on the axis, because at this point she's not either morally correct or morally incorrect. She says, "That old man, the physician, he whom they call Roger Chillingworth, he was my husband." By confessing the truth about Chillingworth to Dimmesdale, she is causing Dimmesdale to want to leave with her and escape his wrath. And what this is doing is feeding her emotional connection with him, and she's making the decision to protect him, not out of thought, but out of the need to escape with him and be with him and fulfill her emotional connection with him. But at the same time, she's protecting him, and she feels like she's doing it for the right reasons, but she's blinded by her own emotions, and that's why she's not morally correct or morally incorrect, and she lies at an equilibrium on the axis. The following skit is in reference to this quote here.
Set in the dark forest of Boston, we see Hester and Dimmesdale talking about future plans.
Okay, Dimmesdale, let's go. We're gonna go to Europe, run away from our problems. We don't have to live with our mistakes, adultery. Let me just call Kant really quick, see what he thinks. Hello? Yes, Kant?
Hi, Hester.
What do you think? How's my moral compass right now?
Well, The thing is, you seem to be doing your actions supposedly for the betterment of Dimmsdale, but in reality, I think you're doing it so that you guys can escape and be together.
Really? I don't want to deal with, like, my shame. This is the place where I made my sin. I mean, I need a new beginning.
Well, in that, you're just escaping your punishment, and you're not facing your true punishment, which you deserve.
I see.
So I don't think your morality is going to be very high.
Got it.
Following skit is a depiction of this quote here.
Let's fast forward to Hester a few years later and see what she's up to in Boston.
So here I am back in Boston. I've returned from Europe. Pearl is her own individual, her own woman, and she's thriving in Europe. But I believe it was my moral obligation to return, and this is my attempt to repent from my sin, living in the same place where I committed it. But let me call Kant, see what he has to say about it. Hello? Kant?
Oh, hi Hester. I see that you're now fulfilling your moral obligation due to your own free will by returning to Boston.
Yes, free will. I mean, I think I've come a long way. I really didn't understand throughout my whole life. Like, after I committed the sin, I didn't really understand. I was still in love with Dimmsdale, but, yeah.
Yeah, I see. Throughout your life, you've just been doing things for other people. You've been doing things for the love of Dimmsdale. You've been doing things for your daughter, but you've never been doing it for yourself. And now you're finally doing it.
Now I just have a chance to be alone in this cottage where I have a past and I have a history.
Yeah, and now I think your morality is all-time high because you're just doing things for yourself.
I've just really released my pride, my ego, and I'm just truly free.
Yes.
On our graph, Chillingworth is blue, and he starts off at a positive 10, because when he initially arrives in Boston, he is solely governed by reason, which agrees with Kant's perspective of free will, as it says he was controlled by an effort of his own free will on page 57. And also, he was a man thoughtful of others, craving little for himself. So he was a selfless person, and it's explicitly written in Hawthorne's description that he was governed by his free will. And there's no interference of emotion in Chillingworth's character here, which is why he begins at a 10, which is the epitome of the maximum moral worth according to Kant.
Chillingworth and Hester reach an equilibrium in the beginning of chapter 4, where Hester says, "I have thought of death, wished for it, would have even prayed for it," page 67. And also, Chillingworth says, "Even if I imagine a scheme of vengeance, what could I do better for my object than to let thee live?" Page 67. What this is showing is that they're both equally moral and immoral, for Hester has thought of death and used herself as a means to an end, but at the same time she's using her power of her own will to resist those thoughts and resist those feelings. And that's why she said would have even prayed for it, because she's showing that she's moved past them, and that's why her morality is rising. But at the same time, Chillingworth is, he's helping her out, and he's helping her live, which is good, and his morality is higher there, but it's dropping quickly because it's showing that his need for revenge is clouding his judgment, and he's saying, even if I imagine a scheme of vengeance, what could I do better for myself? And this is showing that his selfishness is getting in the way of his being a physician, and his morality is dropping, and they've both reached a same exact spot in the same exact area on the axis at 4, and that's why they have an intersection marker there.
Chillingworth then drops to a -9 when he begins to take pleasure in Hester's pain, in which she touches the letter on her breast. And this shows that passion is beginning to invade his once reasonable self. And then in the next quote on page 69, Chillingworth says, "I shall see this man, I shall see him tremble, he must needs be mine." This is when the obsession with another individual starts, which disagrees with Kant's philosophy, because Chillingworth is using Dimmsdale as a means to an end, which justifies the big drop from 0 to -9, because at 0, he wasn't using someone as a means to an end, where he is at -9.
In this quote in chapter 9 on page 112, Hawthorne describes Chillingworth as having had undergone a remarkable change. Something ugly and evil in his face was haunted either by Satan himself. This makes Chillingworth drop to a -10 because he is literally being described as the evil that Satan is. He is completely consumed by his obsession with Dimmesdale, and this forces his emotions to overcome his reason.
The following skit is based on these two quotes here.
In chapter 14, specifically page 149, we see Chillingworth pondering over decisions made regarding Dimmesdale.
You know, I'm a physician and all. I'm supposed to help the people of the city. So I was really doing the right thing by helping Dimmesdale. I mean, he was dying. I gave him medicine, trying to keep him alive. But let's see what Kant thinks about this. Kant, do you think it was morally right for me to keep him alive?
Oh, hey Chillingworth. Well, this is the thing. I don't know if it was actually that morally correct because you weren't keeping him alive because it was the right thing to do. You were keeping him alive so that he could just suffer longer and you can get more revenge on him.
That does make sense, but yeah, I guess you're right. In this quote from chapter 17 on page 168, Hawthorne says, Roger Chillingworth and his authorized inference as a physician, that these bad opportunities had been turned into cruel purpose. Chillingworth stays static at a -10 because there is nothing that has been done to raise his level of morality. Hawthorne also chooses to give Chillingworth the position in the city as physician because it masks his cruel purposes with a title that seems to make him good to all of society.
The final skit is based on this quote here on page 225, where Chillingsworth morality raises from a -10 to a -7.
Fast forward to chapter 24, where we see Chillingworth dying as a result of his obsession with another individual, Dimmesdale. Now that he is dead, we must see how Chillingworth is doing.
Well, I'm dying and I'm old and I don't know what to do with my life, so what can I do to make sure my legacy is golden? I got it! I'm gonna leave Pearl my estate, so that way, when she grows up, considering she's the youngest and is gonna live longer than Hester, obviously, she can tell everyone about the good deeds I've done and how awesome I was and what a great person I was. But let's call Con and see what he says. Hi Con, how you doing?
Oh, hey Chillingsworth. I see that you're trying to fulfill your life's destiny by giving Pearl all of your land.
Yeah, I've always been just such a really materialistic guy. I just figured this is like the cherry on the top. It's perfect, What do you think?
Well, for the last 7 years, all you've been doing is just basing all of your actions off of emotions and trying to get revenge. And suddenly you think that just because you're leaving land, you're gonna just suddenly make up for all of that?
Well, yeah.
Well, personally, my beliefs is that you're just doing this to get for your own selfishness and just to get people to like you, and you're not doing it for the right reasons. If you're doing it because you knew it was the right thing to do, because you knew Pearl deserved it, that'd be one thing. But in reality, you're doing it just to get people to like you.
Alright, well, guess I can just be dead. In this quote in chapter 17 on page 168, Hawthorne says, Roger Chillingworth and his authorized inference as a physician, that these bad opportunities had been turned into a cruel purpose. Chillingworth stays at a -10 because he has nothing that has made his moral compass rise. Let's fast forward and take a look at what Hester's doing in Boston a few years later.
So here I am, I've returned to Boston from Europe, and I'm just attempting to fulfill my moral obligation and to repent from my sin. But let me call Kant, see what he has to say about it. Hello?
Oh, hey, Kant. The light got me distracted, okay?